All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final launch event of this week's Medium Writing Academy live launch week. We're so excited to be with you one more time this week with a live article review. We've done this a couple of times in the cohort in other sessions that we hosted over the last few years, but we haven't done it in a while, and a lot has changed, to be fair. A lot has changed based on Medium's side, on the guidelines they have, and a lot has changed on how Zulie and I review articles based on the work we do at Better Marketing and our jobs as nominators. So we're thrilled to be here with you. Let us know in the chat if you're here with us live, where you're joining from, if you can hear us, if you can see us, and if you're ready to get started. Hi, Zulie, again, and thank you for taking time today to share your editing wisdom.
Yeah, of course. I love doing these. I love, especially since we've taken over editorship of Better Marketing, I feel like my editing skills have gotten so much sharper and better. And I'm just really excited to share how we would punch articles up, because a lot of times we do, we'll get submissions to Better Marketing and we'll think with just a couple tweaks, this would have been so great. And yeah, so it's going to be really cool to have the chance to share those insights with everybody.
Yeah, and it's actually both stories we're going to review today are actually cool stories, to be honest. We're not reviewing stories that need a ton of changes or that are total flops. And this happens to us a lot of times, right? We will get a story submission and it's like, this is cool, this is unique, this stands out, there is a unique personal perspective, but we need changes in order for it to be published in the publication or have a better chance to get boosted.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Did you want to?
Yeah,
let's bring the first piece up on the screen.
So thank you to everybody, if you're here, who submitted an article to me via email. I randomly selected Gina Ishams. I think it's Gina, might be Jenna. So thank you for submitting this article. Gina's actually submitted quite a few to Better Marketing, so I was familiar with the kind of main ideas in the article and her writing style, so I was really excited to see this in my inbox, and I was also excited to see that the random number selector picked this one out. So let me zoom in a little bit here. For context, Gina said that she submitted this article to Inc. magazine and they said it wasn't exactly the right fit. So she was wondering why they might not have liked it, but also what she could have done differently. So the article is about, the introduction starts with Sun Chimps making this bag that was apparently louder than the what a pilot would hear in his cockpit. Obviously, that's super loud. I am a little sensitive to loud noises myself, so when I saw that, I couldn't help but wince. And then there's this introduction about it. Then Gina gets into talking about how sound creates decision and action. This section is really about how our brain is interpreting sounds and how that connects to our experiences. And then the conclusion, the kind of takeaway section, is about, okay, well, too much sound can be bad. Let's bring it into advertising. So I'll go ahead and ask the audience, given that this is a 4-minute read, what your thoughts are on the structure of this story so far. Because as soon as I saw this, I had a couple of thoughts myself. And I don't care if you get it right or wrong. I just want to hear what you think just in the audience. I'll give it 5 or 10 seconds just to hear what you think about this article and whether you would have changed it, because I thought this was a really cool, interesting concept, but I also saw a couple of things that I think would have punched it up pretty immediately. I'll give it 3 more seconds because I know there's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, we always have a delay, so feel free to share your thoughts as soon as you had a chance to look through the article. I found the piece to be really fun to read, to be honest. Most parts of it was really interesting. It was fresh, and I know it's not too hard to make some changes to this that would actually get us excited about publishing the piece or even getting a nomination for this piece.
Yeah. All right, so I'll go ahead and start suggesting the changes that I probably would have made. So first of all, I would have changed the title. I am very particular about titles, and this is something I've kind of developed a feel for. After 5 years of writing, when I read Where the Crinkle Meet the Crunch, I have no idea what this article is about. I have no clue. I know it's probably about sound, and obviously the image of the sun chips gives me an idea that it's probably about potato chip bags. But I don't know, is this going to be something that's going to be informational? Is it going to be entertaining? Is it going to be about marketing? Is it going to be about health? I have no idea. So I would suggest a couple of different title alternatives based on the main idea of the story, which is something we'll get to that I thought was buried a little bit too deep. I think that this is kind of the main idea of the story, which is that sound should be strategic. Like, you should really think about what you want to do with your noise, but you shouldn't overwhelm people with noise. And like with potato chips, especially, like the bag is supposed to give you this prelude to what you're about to have in your mouth. So I thought that was like, that's what I pulled as the main idea from this. And I think that that should be reflected in the title. So a couple of title thoughts I had would be something like, you could even call out the brand, Sun Chips. Am I writing? No, Sun Chips has a space in it. Sun Chips bags nearly deafened consumers. It cost them. Whoops. And you can do a little bit of back of the napkin math if you want to come up with an actual number here, because I think numbers and brand names are just such easy wins to drop into titles, because you get this recognition and you get like, oh, okay, so this is going to be a marketing story, because like this design bags. What do you think, Sinem?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Do you want to zoom a little more in so we can see? Yeah, I think that's better. Same thought here. Based on the title, we have no idea what it's really about, who it is for. If you read the story, you get a clear idea on who can really benefit from the story. The problem is you want to have that promise right away. You want to be very clear about it. It's very dangerous to be cryptic with headlines when you are still at the very beginning at the journey. You don't have an audience yet. You don't, especially if you don't have an audience who knows your style and just clicks on an article because they are used to you and they are just clicking because it's you. That's not the case for most of us when we're starting out, and it's not the case for most of you guys who are here with us still wanting to learn, wanting to grow your audiences. You want to be very clear with your promises most of the time, especially with educational pieces, informational pieces. If you want to teach something, you want to make clear what you are teaching and who you are teaching. It can be slightly different if you are writing personal essays, if you are going more into the memoir kind of article. But the kind of story we review here, we prefer clarity and a clear promise. And I love the idea of the brand name and the title, specificity with numbers if possible. Either way, there are a lot of ways you could take this article with specific takeaways. And based on what exactly you want to communicate, you can take the headline that direction too. Like, who should be the main audience to benefit from this article?
Yeah, because I guess
that's really interesting.
Go ahead. Sorry.
We have a really interesting case study and story behind the article, right? I found it really interesting, especially the intro with the pilot and stuff. I wish for images or screenshots in the intro, if there are any, even if it's just from this Facebook post, or if if there are any memes that people created making fun of the bag or something like that, could have made it even more fun to read.
Yeah, like this section would have been great for any one of, oh God, stop, go away, Grammarly. Any one of these sections, like the Facebook page, the Google search, the PepsiCo ad, any one of those would have been a really funny like screenshot to include here for sure. I think the other thing was this section I think is really interesting. And I personally love bringing in a little bit of science into my articles, even the articles that have nothing to do with science. it creates credibility. Like when I'm writing about something, people might not know that I know what I'm talking about, but hyperlinking to an actual scientific study or quoting an expert makes me look better by comparison. It makes the article more believable, more explainable, more trustworthy. So I think this section would be really great to have, again, some more specificity talking about, okay, well, like, what is this connection? Do you want to even drop in a couple things from neuroscience? Do you want to try to, like, where is this information coming from and how can you back it up? Like something like this could be so easily punched up with like one study suggests that when sound doesn't meet expectation, our brain labels it as bad, and pull that back to the back to the chip thing right here. And you're like, well, this is why this launch was so bad, because people opened the bag and were immediately deafened by the sound of this like incredibly loud. Sorry, I still find it so funny. By this incredibly loud potato chip bag. So like just a little bit of science here would punch that up. Yeah. I also found that this section, I wanted this again to be a little bit more specific. So this talks a lot about like, okay, this is what brands need to do to make sure that they get the noise nuisance deal under control. I would pull this again into like a specific ad that you've seen recently and how that made you feel. Or again, if you can find any scientific studies to back that up, that would be really awesome. And then, yeah, Sinem, you kind of mentioned, I find myself scrolling a little bit here because I'm seeing some redundancy. Like we've already seen this idea mentioned. We've seen this idea mentioned a little higher up. And we've seen this kind of hinted at, but not explicitly outlined. And then when we get to the all make mistakes section, let's let bygones be bygones and let bags be bags. I think this actually kind of undermines the main point of the article. I actually was like, is this really the end? Like, is this the bottom? Because if you're trying to make this idea that, you know, sound matters and brands can do better, should Sunship let bygones be bygones and let bags be bags? No, they had a whole bag redesign. Like they did not let bygones be bygones. They fixed this error. And I thought that this was a really great opportunity to have some actionable takeaways for brands, like you said, Sinem. Have something where the reader gets to the end and they're like, okay, this is super valuable. Not just that, but I've got like, not just have I read this super entertaining, interesting article, but I've got specific actions for what I should do with my brand or what I should avoid with my next bag redesign. So in summary, really interesting story, such a cool case study. I'd love to see more specificity, more screenshots, more links to back up what you're saying. And again, just like really driving home the value to the reader. Like, what is this story about? What's it delivering? How are you going to deliver it? Who's this article for? And making that clear at every point in the article. I loved it. I was really glad to see the story because I think it's an interesting article. And I think with a couple steps, it could really be punched up to be something really fantastic. Sinem, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so one more key element that we review when we look for boost-worthy stories or when we look for boost nominations is what's the connection of the author to this specific story? Why are you writing the story? And this is kind of tricky because we saw a few of Gina's stories in the publication already. We know she's a sound expert. She's writing a lot about this topic. She has a lot of expertise and first-hand experience. But you cannot assume that your reader knows that. You cannot assume that the editor reviewing the story knows that. And you cannot assume that the final person making the boost decision knows that. I don't see that expertise being highlighted in that specific article. And that's a very thin line. And it's interesting because this is such a specific story that you, as editors, as longtime writers, longtime medium people, we know just intuitively that this story isn't written because you think it's a popular topic, because it's going to go viral, because other people have written it, etc. It's obvious this is passionate. It's based on first-hand expertise. You still have to point it out, though. Sometimes you have to be more explicit. Sometimes you can be more implicit. You can refer to an example that you've covered in your own business, that you've worked on with your clients. You can just mention in one line the years of experience you have, where this passion stems from. Just give us something so we can add a line when we are reviewing your story saying, okay, this is based on first-hand experience. This is an author who actually knows what she's talking about and who's in the business, has this experience based on her life, her relationships, her career, whatever it is.
Yeah, like you say, I think if you have marketing experience, especially if you have like, I know, Gina, just from reading your other articles, that you have a lot of experience specifically in like sound marketing. Yeah, you could drop that in a line. Like when I don't know if you got a degree in sound marketing or if that's even a thing, but you could say something like, when I was getting my degree in sound marketing, or, you know, working for this company with sound marketing, this story was so famous to us, blah, blah, blah. And it happened 10 years, or God, more than 10 years ago, 13 years ago. Like that immediately sets you up as an expert. Or yeah, anything that kind of alludes to the amount of time that you've been doing this is really, really great. Oh, sorry, Gina just commented that sound marketing degrees aren't really a thing. But yeah, something like that in the first introductory paragraph sets the scene, doesn't have to take up a long time, but immediately tells the reader why they should trust you and why this is going to be a good story.
I'm seeing a few comments in the chat that viewers have sharing their thoughts, their suggestions. Let's take a quick look at them and share what we think.
Oh, so, Gina Isham. Sorry, Gina, I was getting your name completely wrong.
So I see a comment saying, I love personal story side, open with sounds I love, or my experience opening a too loud bag.
I think that would have been a fun way to open it as well. I did like how Gina introduced the article. Sorry, bear with me with some super fast scrolling real quick. I liked this as an introduction. I thought that was so fun. The only way I could think to even punch that up would be to bring it up, like make that paragraph basically the introduction and say, in 2010, pilot blah 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 opened the bag in his cockpit and found that, you know, you could really put the reader in the scene by describing that anecdote, and then talk about how Sunships wanted to do this whole eco-friendly bag redesign. I think that would be a nice way to introduce the personal story. I think the introduction works as is. I do think sometimes like a personal line at the start or something that really grounds the reader can be a really great way to start the article.
That's actually so funny about this piece. Even the way it is now, you have this image in your mind of the pilot with the chip bag in the cockpit, which is a very strong starting point. Like it's a lot of introductions. With a lot of introductions, the problem is that the introduction is too boring, it's too dry, it doesn't pull you into the story. This is kind of a fun image to have in your mind.
Yeah.
John suggested more images. I don't see a need for more images. So this is a 4-minute read on Medium. I'm typically not a fan of adding images just to add images if they don't have a clear point and don't make the story more valuable, especially in a 4-minute read. If you have like a 10-minute read, you might have one image in the middle to break it up visually. But usually I am not a fan of adding images just to add them, because that's not typically what readers are on Medium for. What do you think, Zulie?
I think this is the only section that I thought could have benefited from a picture, because I thought it would have been really, like, but only because it would have been really funny. I thought that was really the only section that was missing pictures. I used to put more images in mine, but then the longer I wrote, especially on Medium, where I think the focus so much is on the craft of the word itself, we're really lucky to write on a platform that the focus is just purely on the story. So I would tend to agree with you there, Sinem, that I don't think this needed pictures just for the sake of more images, personally.
Mm-hmm. Another comment was on the paragraphs being too long.
I disagreed with this comment also. I've copy pasted this onto a Google Doc, which I'm actually not going to do with the next one we do, because I think I think it looks better on Medium. But I think, like, I try to keep my paragraphs at 4 to 5 lines as a maximum. That's just how I do things. And I think this kind of sticks to that rule. And I actually liked the way that Gina was like ending the articles with these like punchy questions, these single, well, okay, well, what about this? And I think she did it. in a couple other places too. But I didn't think these paragraphs were too long. What did you think, Sinem?
Yeah, same. And I also see a shift from Medium like 2 years ago, where we had a lot of one-line paragraphs,
The
to
more
Medium
bloggy
today.
style.
Yeah. But I don't like. We don't want huge walls of text, so you do need to break up your paragraphs. But this actually seems quite balanced to me too, to be honest. Okay.
I think
there were just two comments, two title suggestions that I think are interesting that I would love to quickly touch on before we move on. So again, from John. So the first one he suggested is one thing Sun Chips should include in the back.
I react very strongly in a negative way against one thing titles just because of my long exposure to clickbait. I think maybe other readers who don't read as much on the internet as I do would have a less strong reaction. But I personally find like the one thing you need titles to be a little bit overdone because so many people relied on them for so long to try to like desperately get clicks. I think you want with, especially if this is now going to live on Medium, you really want a title that isn't anywhere, that doesn't even look like clickbait, even if this title isn't really clickbait, because you are going to tell the readers what the one thing is that they should include, which is a quieter bag. But things that even look like the word shocking is never going to get your story any clicks or reads anymore, because readers on Medium hate the word shocking because of the just how long people were always saying like this one shocking trick, you know, things like that.
And I still miss clarity in that one, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true.
In terms of what I'm not really interested in reading what Sun Chips should include in the back. Like the real value of this article is kind of, it doesn't come across with this title either, especially not for the target audience it's written for. And the second option we have is this one, Sun Chips and Noise Abatement, Altered States. I feel the same about this one. It's still cryptic,
not quite
not
clear enough.
necessarily clear.
That could work as a subtitle.
Yeah.
Because it kind of hints about what the story is about, but you'd want a really clear title to get your point across.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's do a shorter review of one more. Yeah.
All right, let me share.
Do you have it ready?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So we're on Medium now for this one, just so we can get the full Medium experience. Thank you, Gina, by the way, for submitting that article. That was a really interesting one, and hopefully I'll look forward to seeing it in Better Marketing submission queue. Okay, Sinem, quick question. I know you sent me this yesterday, and I had a piece of feedback then. Did you pass that on to the writer? Or was the title always like this? Okay, never mind. I must have missed it then.
No, that was a total coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Because when Sinem sent me this story yesterday for us to pre-review, I think it was just this. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I scrolled down and I saw that the author got a job at Spotify. And I think my exact text to you was, why didn't she include Spotify in the title? So it was really cool to see when I had a moment of doubting my own sanity, but it was cool to see that you already edited that and fixed that in, because that was my first piece of feedback. Yeah, Sinem, I would like to hear your thoughts first on this, because I had a few.
I have one very specific odd thought that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. I have a real problem with titles. Can you just scroll to the title?
Course,
titles starting with an ing form verb with a gerund. I feel like it's so hard to write a compelling, sexy title if you start that way, because you cannot really make a promise. You cannot be very specific. It's kind of floating around. I know like students of Medium Writing Academy who have been on coaching calls with me, they hear this like in every second coaching call. I say this. I say like, it's very hard to write a compelling title if you start that way, because it doesn't it kind of forces you to be vague. How do you feel about that? I know that's not like a super general rule. Like there can be viral articles starting that way. There can be strong titles, but usually it's very hard. if you start that way.
Yeah, I also it's not something I'd ever thought about explicitly, but when you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, I also tend to lean away from ing, starting my title with ing, because I love making it super clear, like as early on in the title as I can, who the story is going to be for, what it's going to be about, and that is really hard to do with an ing word at the start. I did have some. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, what did you want to say?
When I was scrolling down to the introduction, I think, just still on the topic of titles, because I really do believe that titles are behind the success of every successful article. I would hint a little bit further at the problem you're going to solve in this article too, because when I was scrolling down and I saw, okay, when you apply to tech, the hardest part is passing the resume screening process. This is so interesting. This is so fascinating. 60,000 applicants. That's like a 0.1% chance. Is that right? If I'm doing my math right, that should be in your title or your subtitle at the very least, because you are going to help people solve the problem of getting past the resume screening. So if you didn't want to mention Spotify, which I see in the comments that your editor was like, don't always mention Spotify. I guess if you're writing a lot of articles about how you got a job at Spotify, that makes sense. You could go the numbers route instead. You could say like how I got a job, how I got like the 1 out of 60,000 or whatever the math is. You include that number in your title and pass the resume screening process. Because if this article is helping people get past that big obstacle in getting a tech job, that should be alluded to or explicitly mentioned in your title or subtitle, so people know exactly what problem you're going to solve when they click on your article, because it's a really interesting problem to solve. And like, I think this must be so helpful for so many people. And this is, I mean, just even including Spotify, I think is great, because you've got the familiarity and you're telling people what you're going to do. But you could still think this is like almost a bit of a brag. Like, you might just have a really stellar resume, but looking at this, I saw that you'd put a lot of thought and work into like and strategy into how you got the job at Spotify. And I think including the number and making it more specifically about like the strategy behind it to pass the resume screening process would be more helpful. Okay, that's my title rant. We'll move on to the next section. Sorry, go ahead, Sinem.
Just real quick, do you have one of the other stories of her opened too? The ones that performed well that she sent us?
I can get it up real quick.
Because there is one that's titled "Don't Start Your Data Science Journey Without These 5 Must-Do Steps." If you can get it up, I think this is there is a great way to compare those two titles based on what promise each of those. Yeah, exactly. And this kind of covers what Zulie just said. First of all, the "don't" is kind of a trigger word. It's kind of a scroll stopping word. Like it's not. If you see words like "don't," "stop," something that just makes you stop because it says stop. It's some of those weird marketing kind of things that you have to be aware of when you're crafting your titles, where you want the first few words of your title and the last few should be the most impactful. If you have long titles like this one, typically the first, let's say, 2 to 3 and the last 2 to 3 words are the most powerful. That's what will stick out. So if she's telling you don't start your data science journey without these steps, you want to pay attention, because you feel like if you are a data scientist or a soon-to-be data scientist, you really want to know what those steps are. There is urgency. There is a very compelling reason to click, because you don't want to miss out. You feel like there might be something that you should know that you don't know yet. Yeah. And then you have the addition, a Spotify data scientist's full guide. You have trust, you have credibility.
You've got the qualification, yeah.
And you are saying full guide, which adds another layer to the story.
Combined with the fact that it's an 18-minute read, because a huge pet peeve of mine is when something says a complete guide or a full guide and it's like 4 minutes long. This is an 18-minute article. You know it's going to be a real full guide, which was awesome to see. Kalu, sorry for spending so long on the title, but I don't know about you, Sinem. I felt like that was the one big thing that stopped that article from succeeding, because the content itself was pretty great.
Yeah.
The only
If
thing
we go
sorry.
back to the
Yeah.
original, yeah. Can you scroll a bit or zoom a bit into the story?
How's that?
Story, yeah, perfect. Story-wise,
The only thing I would have changed was I thought that this section, just below the introduction, but before you get into the steps, I thought it was a bit redundant because it's like this felt like a second introduction to me. Because the introduction itself was so good. Like, here's some stats, here's how I did it, let's get into how I did it. And then you go into, let's think about what the purpose of a resume is. And I thought that kind of slowed down the momentum from your kick-ass introduction to your actual like fantastic steps. It's in below your introduction, but other than that, I didn't think that anything above that, like in this section, really added anything. Go from your cool introduction, this little caveat, directly into the awesome part of like screenshots, breaking down exactly what worked, talking about like the specificity. Like that's the only thing that I think I really would have changed about this article, like content wise.
Yeah, exactly. I felt the same. Like the first parts feel kind of repetitive because you have the same teasing of what's going to come for a little too long until you really get to the point. I see a few lines saying, that's what we're going to do together. Let's build the resume together, etc. You want to build that anticipation, but you don't want to do it over and over again because you might lose people and before they get to the actual body of the text, and you really want to avoid losing them before they get to the good stuff. So that was my big piece of feedback there too. And I think the selling point of this article is actually quite strong. Like with the data we mentioned before, if you have that mapped out in your intro, and if I think even the intro the way it is now, we could leave a few things out to make it even more clear to the point. Because the content delivers, and it's unique, it's personal, it's based on personal experience. It's truly valuable. So you don't want to waste too much time in the intro in the first place.
Yeah, because I only have good things to say about the rest of the article, which is I love how specific it is. You're saying like, do this very specific thing. Don't do this. Here's some like really clear info. Sorry, bear with me for the scrolling. I like how it's structured. Oh, that was maybe the only other thing I would have changed. Is this, because this is quite another long one, isn't it? Yeah, 13 minutes. I maybe would have added a table of contents to the start. There's a Medium plugin that lets you add a table of contents. So when people click on specific elements in the table of contents, they go straight to that section in the article. I'll see if I can find it and paste it into the chat here, because this is such a long article and it's got so many interesting parts. I think it would make that's the only thing that could make this more valuable at this point, is breaking down exactly what the reader's going to get section by section. So they, like, if they want to bookmark this, they can come back to specific sections as they edit or build their resume. Let me see if I can find that table of contents plugin. I use it all the time for my longer stuff.
Yeah, that's a great addition. I love to think about informational, educational pieces like this. This is actually a great example of an article that somebody would save to refer to it later. Like, this is an article, if you are a data scientist, a soon-to-be data scientist, you would save this so you have it ready to review and to work with it in the future. That's a great way to think about articles. And it's actually, I think about this when I decide which stories to nominate for a boost, actually, where I kind of ask myself, if it's a marketing related story, for example, in Better Marketing, which is pretty much everything we review, I ask myself, is this something that I would save so I can read it again later and actually use it? There are so many different aspects of marketing in our case where it's like, okay, this is interesting, but I cannot really do something with it right now. But I really don't want to lose this story because it's so valuable. If that's a yes, you have a really strong story there, or there are aspects of that story that are better than 99% of the content you can find on the platform. And that's really what you want, because most stories we review or that we see on our homepages, would not be a safe, worthy story. So if you can get past that point where you say, okay, I'm creating something or I'm writing something that is safe, worthy, it's pretty likely to be a boost worthy story too.
Yeah, I only agree with that section. I think it's, or Jeff, just basically what you were saying. I think it's my personal litmus test is whether I would want to read something like this in the Atlantic. This isn't a perfect fit for that because obviously the Atlantic doesn't take articles on how to build resumes. But yeah, like something that I'd be like excited to pay for to read. And I think this is just such a useful article.
Yeah. I'm just checking to see if we have any comments or any additional thoughts in here. We have one title suggestion again from John. How my resume landed in the top 1% and got me my job at Spotify.
I think I'd want to clarify exactly what top 1% was. Again, John, this isn't a bad suggestion. It's just because so many other like writing gurus have used that like random 1%, 10x in all the titles for the past God knows how many years. So I think you'd want to specify exactly what that top 1% or top 0.1% is of applicants. That would be an easy fix. Yeah, that title could work. I think I'd still want to talk, because I think to me the real selling point of this article is the strategy behind it, the thinking, the tactical sort of learnings of like, here's exactly what I did and here's why it worked. I think I'd want to refer to some kind of strategy or like tips to make it clear that it wasn't just that you happened to have some like amazing connection or something. Like this was a really great resume and your strategy is what got you the job. Your strategy and the I saw this at the bottom, bear with me for scrolling. The ultimate secret about your dual business and your dual background in business and data science. But even that, like at first I was like, oh, that's a bit of a gotcha, because what if you don't have that? But then you immediately answered that question. Like I loved how you set that up, because as soon as I got there, I was like, oh, this is another hack that's never going to work for me. And then you're like, wait, even for you, I've got some great tips. I love that.
Yeah. This is really valuable. This is what I wish we would see so much more often in Better Marketing too, and in the stories we review. If you have advice pieces, oftentimes you cannot give all the advice on a topic in one article, and you shouldn't try. Like the more specific and clear your article is, the more valuable it's going to be for Medium's readers. Like you want to tackle one point, you want to make have one clear thought or storyline in each story you publish. But if you make a huge promise, and this kind of is a huge article, like fixing your resume takes work, or setting up your resume if you're in transitioning to being a data science, and you give them like additional action steps, that's like top notch. It's what a lot of people don't do, and it allows. This is actually a perfect example of how you can give or go the extra mile without extending your story by 1,000 words. Like it's very short, but it helps you stand out.
Yeah, because one of the questions that I always get, I don't know about you, Sinem, is like, how long should an article be? And my answer is always the really unhelpful, not too long, but not too short. But the way that you actually go through and make sure your article isn't too long or too short is you go through with a red pen and you say, does this paragraph help answer the question? And if not, I'm taking it out. Or like, has it been answered already? And how you make sure it's not too short is you say, well, is there anything I've left out? Is there anything that a reader would still want to know after asking that? And that's what this section was so good at. Like, this is something that's a great addition, because that is something that a reader would be asking. So I thought that was so great to include.
Yeah. We will have to recap very soon, but I'm just seeing a final comment by the author of this story saying, and yet it flopped. I think that's actually a really, really important point to mention. Like, a story can be really good and valuable, and it can still flop if a few key elements just aren't tackled, and if it doesn't get distributed internally, if the title doesn't get clicked by the right people or by too many people in the first place, if the intro is too long and doesn't get people to read through. And I think that's basically what went wrong with this piece. Like, it's not the value of this piece, it's not the writing or whether it's a valuable idea or not. It's a great idea. It's a better idea than a lot of other medium stories that we see and review. And yet that's not enough. Like, there is always two parts to a story. Like, what's the idea? Or there is multiple points. What's the big idea? Like, is the idea valuable? Is it does it have a potential to be beneficial and interesting to many people? Is the writing itself on point? Like, is it an interesting, engaging piece to read, free of mistakes and errors? And then there is the whole packaging and marketing side of a story, which you shouldn't necessarily ignore, because that's what gets your story in front of people. That's title, it's framing of the title, it's knowing who you are speaking to and what pain point or desire or just what you're referring to in your title. In a lot of instructional educational pieces, it's going to be a pain point or something your reader wants to get out of the article. If you're writing different kinds of stories like essays, personal stories, it's going to be a little different. But in that case, you have a very clear, tangible value. And then, of course, the intro, as we said before, like, if you don't make it through the intro, it's the story is not going to be presented to many more people in the first place, and you don't have the possibility or the opportunity to get your story in front of a bigger audience.
I think, yeah, I do want to quickly, I know I've done this at all the other live events that we've done, but I do want to quickly do my how the Medium algorithm works again real quick, because I think this is such a great example of it. When you publish a story on Medium, Medium decides a small group of people, like a test audience, of people to show it to see if it performs well. If those initial pool of people who come from your followers, the publication followers, the people who follow the topics, if they click, if they stay, if they comment, if they react well, then Medium expands the pool. Khalud, sorry, I know I'm probably not saying your name right. Please feel free to post a pronunciation guide. I think the title is probably what kept people away. Like, Medium probably showed this to a huge group of people, and most people saw the title, the original title, before you mentioned Spotify, and probably said, like, oh, another data science resume guide. I've seen these before, not realizing like how valuable the article was and how like fantastic the information and unique the insights were going to be in the article. So again, that's probably why Sinem and I spent so much time workshopping the title, because I think that and the introduction maybe kept people, like, for people who clicked, they read the double introduction, and were like, okay, this might just be fluff, and then bounced. That's the only thing I can think of that kept this from doing really well, because the content was, yeah, really great.
One more final thought I just had is the target audience of this piece aware that the resume might be the problem? Or do you have to frame this in a way that goes more into the direction of how to get your dream data science job? And then you have to educate them on the fact that oftentimes the resume is one of the key problems because of how crowded the market is and because of how many different mistakes you can make there. That might be another factor. Like, because you said, oh, another resume guide. Is that,
I don't know.
I don't know. That's part of that's one of the many questions you have to ask yourself about your audience if you have such a specific niche, because you have the opportunity to know your audience really well. You don't have that opportunity if you are writing about a lot of different topics for different audiences.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something to that?
No, just I'm still thinking about how I would workshop this title, but I think we've workshopped it a lot. So yeah. I'll keep my thoughts to myself. But yeah, I thought, yeah, really great article. Just held back a little bit with a couple of small tweaks. I think it could do a lot really well.
All right. We covered a lot. We hope that this has been useful. We said it before, we're going to say it one more time. If you liked this kind of session, if you liked what we've been doing for the past week and you are interested in learning more about how to grow your audience on Medium now with all the changes, using all the internal distribution methods to your advantage, having people help you with your articles, review them, review your ideas, and tell you what to do differently and why to do it differently, so you can do it all by yourself in the coming weeks and months. Make sure you join us inside the Medium Writing Academy Live Edition. We are kicking off next week, and we have dozens of live group coaching sessions that go kind of like this session, where we are on a Zoom call with you. We bring your stories up here. We have your questions that we just collect in a student community, so we can just make sure you have all the answers you need, you have the feedback you need, and you can continue working on your pieces. You can come up with great ideas. You get the feedback you need, so you're not stuck, so you can get published in the biggest, most read publications, so you have the best chance to get your stories boosted, and that you just feel really confident about the work you do. This is the final day to join us. So we are closing the doors to the live edition at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're still interested but have questions, feel free to drop us a comment or reply to any of our emails. Either way, we're looking forward to hearing from you. We already have a lot of amazing students in there. Zulie, I don't know if you've been checking out the student community already, but the energy is amazing. The excitement and motivation is really high. And yeah, I'm actually really excited to meet all of the students in the kickoff session on Monday.
I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, I think that's with anything like this, right? It's like buying a gym membership. The gym membership itself isn't going to do anything. You have to go and do all those push-ups, and you have to do what your personal trainer tells you to do to start getting those improvements. And yeah, when I saw how excited people were and like energetic and actually really ready to listen to what they were doing wrong and take those steps to start making their writing better, like that as a coach slash, you know, gym trainer is always great to see, because it means we've got people who are really to do the work, and that's awesome.
Yeah, we are excited about working with anyone who is inside. Make sure you don't miss the deadline. If you've been on the fence and you're still thinking about it, we have to close the doors so we can get started with everyone who is inside. Yeah, reach out to us if you still have any questions. We're looking forward to seeing you inside, and thank you for joining this session. We hope it was valuable, and we'll hopefully see you inside. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.